Smoke rolled across the Texas plains like a dying breath from the earth itself. The air reeked of gunpowder, burnt leather, and the heavy silence that follows slaughter. A red sun hung low in the western sky, throwing long shadows over bodies strewn across the dry grass, settlers and Comanche alike. The battle had lasted barely an hour, but the land still trembled with the echo of gunfire. Buzzards had already begun their slow circling, black wings slicing through the orange haze. Somewhere among the fallen, a faint sound broke the stillness, a low, rasping breath. Tayan stirred. Blood matted his dark hair, and a deep wound scored his side where a musket ball had torn through muscle. He blinked against the light, his mind clawing back from the edges of death. The last thing he remembered was betrayal, a flash of his cousin Kodo's eyes, cold and hard as stone, as the man turned his horse and rode away, leaving Tayan to die among the corpses. He tried to rise, but pain crushed him back into the dirt. His body trembled with fever. Around him, the prairie stretched endless and empty, save for the distant smoke from a burning wagon train. The wind carried the cries of ravens, harsh and mocking. Tayan gritted his teeth and pulled himself forward, dragging his wounded leg through the dust. Each movement left a trail of blood. He reached a dry creek bed and collapsed against a rock. His breath came shallow, his vision swimming. Somewhere in that haze of heat and pain, his mind drifted to memory. The soft laughter of his daughter by the river, the face of his brother slain in battle, the songs of his people that now seemed to come from another lifetime. The frontier had no mercy for the broken. It buried them without a name. Hours passed. The sun fell, leaving the plains bathed in amber light. The shadows grew long and cold. Tayan's hands shook as he tore a strip from his tunic to press against the wound. His lips were cracked, his tongue dry as dust. He could almost feel death crouching beside him, patient, unhurried. He looked to the horizon one last time, wondering if the Great Spirit would forgive him for failing his tribe. Then soft footsteps. At first, he thought it was the wind. Then he heard it again, the scrape of small boots against rock. A figure appeared above the ridge, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing a torn calico dress and a bonnet far too big for her head. She moved slowly, cautiously, clutching a dented tin canteen to her chest. Her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Tayan's fingers twitched toward his knife, but the weapon was gone. He could only watch as she climbed down toward him, loose stones scattering beneath her feet. She froze halfway, her breath catching as she saw him, bloodied, fierce, and still alive. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them was tight, like a bowstring ready to snap. The girl took one hesitant step closer. She glanced back toward the distant smoke of what might have been her home. There was no one else, just the endless plain and this dying man who should have been her enemy. Tayan tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped his throat. He raised a trembling hand, not in threat but plea. His eyes, dark, proud, desperate, met hers. The girl hesitated, then unscrewed the canteen lid. The sound of sloshing water cut through the still air like a miracle. She approached slowly, knees shaking, until she stood just beyond his reach. For a long moment she stared down at him, at the painted lines on his face, the blood on his chest, the war symbols she did not understand. Then, without a word, she knelt and poured a thin stream of water into his cupped hand. Tayan drank greedily, choking, the liquid burning his dry throat. When he looked up again, she was already backing away, clutching the canteen to her chest as if afraid of what she had done. The sky darkened. The first stars began to appear. The girl stood at the edge of the creek, torn between fear and something deeper, pity, perhaps, or the faint echo of her mother's voice telling her to help the wounded. She watched him for a long time before turning to climb back up the ridge. Tayan lay motionless, the taste of water still on his lips. The child's small shadow disappeared against the twilight, leaving him alone once more. But the silence felt different now. Not final, not absolute. Somewhere in that vast emptiness, Hope had taken its first fragile breath. The night wind sighed through the grass, whispering across the open plains like the breath of old ghosts. Thunder murmured in the distance, slow, rolling, and low. Tayan lay against the rough stone of the creek bed, wrapped in darkness and pain. The stars above were sharp and cold, like distant eyes watching him die. His wound throbbed with fever, the taste of iron thick in his mouth. Each breath scraped his chest like broken glass. He didn't know how much time had passed when he heard it again. Soft footsteps, careful, uncertain. He opened his eyes and saw the little girl returning, the same torn calico dress, her small figure barely visible in the starlight. She carried something wrapped in cloth, maybe food or bandages. She hesitated at the edge of the creek, looking down at him. For a long time she didn't move. Her hands trembled as she clutched the bundle. Finally, she whispered, her voice small and shaky. "Don't hurt me." Tayan couldn't understand her words, but her tone reached him, the mix of fear and courage. He shook his head slowly, his lips too dry to speak. He lowered his eyes, showing surrender. The gesture seemed to calm her. She climbed down again, each step careful. The wind tugged at her bonnet. When she reached him, she knelt and opened the cloth bundle. Inside were a few hard biscuits and a strip of jerky. Her voice cracked. "My mama said we should help when we can." He watched her through half-closed eyes. She tore a piece of the jerky and held it out, hesitating. He took it with trembling fingers, raising it to his mouth. The taste was bitter, but life itself. When lightning flashed across the plain, it lit her face, pale, dirt-streaked, and determined. There were tears she refused to let fall. She looked so young, yet there was a steel in her that belonged to someone far older. Tayan tried to speak her language. The words came slow, broken. "You help." She nodded, startled that he could speak at all. "Why?" he asked, his accent thick. Her answer came after a pause. "Because you're hurt." Simple words. But in that simplicity lay everything. The human bond buried beneath hate, the fragile bridge between two worlds at war. He watched her tear part of her dress hem to make a crude bandage. She dabbed the wound with water from the canteen. He winced, the pain cutting through his chest, but he did not pull away. She flinched at the sight of his blood, yet kept working, her little hands steady. When she finished, she sat back, breathing hard. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and wet earth. A rumble of thunder crawled closer. Tayan's gaze drifted to the horizon, dark clouds rolling in like mountains of smoke. The storm was coming. He pointed to a shallow opening in the rock face nearby, a hollow barely large enough for two people. "There," he whispered. The girl followed his gesture. She nodded, then took his arm, trying to help him move. He was heavy, his strength gone, but together they half-crawled, half-dragged toward the shelter. Each inch was agony. The first drops of rain fell before they reached it. Inside, the cave was damp and cold. Lightning flashed outside, turning the world white for a heartbeat. The rain came down hard, hammering the earth. Anna, the girl, sat near the entrance, her arms wrapped around her knees. She watched Tayan as he slumped against the stone wall, breathing raggedly. His eyes fluttered open now and then, always returning to her small form framed by lightning. A wolf howled somewhere in the distance. Another answered, closer. Anna's heart pounded. She looked toward the sound, her body rigid. Tayan shifted, his instincts awakening. The storm masked the noises of the night, but he could sense movement, shadows sliding through the tall grass. Then, a low growl at the cave's mouth. A pair of yellow eyes gleamed in the dark. Anna gasped, frozen. The wolf crept closer, teeth bared. Tayan reached for a rock, his hand shaking. The wolf lunged. In one motion, Tayan shoved Anna aside and brought the rock down hard, striking the animal's skull. The beast yelped, snapped back, and vanished into the storm. Another flash of lightning revealed two more shapes circling outside. Tayan forced himself upright, his body screaming with pain. He grabbed a jagged branch near the cave entrance, his only weapon, and let out a guttural cry that echoed through the rain. The sound was enough. The wolves retreated, melting into the dark. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain and thunder. Anna crawled to him, eyes wide. "You saved me," she whispered. Tayan leaned back, gasping for breath, his strength nearly spent. He managed a faint nod. His blood mixed with rainwater, flowing in thin red streams along the cave floor. The storm raged on, but inside, something had changed. Anna took his hand gently, her small fingers gripping his calloused ones. They sat in silence, the thunder fading, the wind calming. The night no longer felt endless. Somewhere in that tiny shelter, among blood, rain, and fear, two strangers, enemy and child, had begun to trust each other. When dawn came, soft and gray, Anna awoke to find Tayan still breathing, though barely. She brushed the hair from his face and whispered, "Please don't die." Outside, the plains steamed under the newborn light. The storm had washed the blood from the earth, but not from their memories. Yet in that fragile morning calm, the world felt just a little less cruel. The sun broke through a thin veil of clouds, spilling pale light over the soaked plains. The rain had washed away the ash and blood, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and grass. Tayan sat outside the cave, his back against the rock, watching the horizon. His wound was healing slowly, though fever still lingered in his bones. Every breath hurt, but it was the kind of pain that meant he was alive. The girl, Anna, sat nearby, her knees pulled to her chest, chewing a piece of dry bread. She looked at him from time to time, her curiosity stronger than her fear now. He had saved her life during the storm, and that changed everything. She didn't see a savage anymore. She saw a man who had protected her when no one else did. Tayan watched a hawk circling above. It reminded him of Gray Hawk, his old comrade, once his brother in battle. Now a ghost he wasn't sure still walked the earth. He remembered Gray Hawk's words. "A leader is not the one who commands, Tayan, but the one who endures." He closed his eyes and saw again the fire that consumed his camp weeks earlier, the betrayal that tore his tribe apart. His cousin Kodo had traded loyalty for power, siding with the white men for guns and whiskey. The thought burned through Tayan's chest worse than the wound. Anna's small voice broke his thoughts. "Do you have family?" He opened his eyes slowly. Her question struck deeper than any blade. He stared at the distant horizon before answering in his broken English. "Yes, had." She looked down, nodding quietly. Her lips trembled. "Me too." The silence between them grew heavy, filled with things neither could say. She began to speak in halting words, like she was afraid of her own memories. "There were men. They came at night. Mama hid me under the wagon. When I came out, everything was on fire. I ran and ran until I saw the river." Her eyes glistened. She looked at him as if searching for understanding. Tayan didn't speak, but he placed his hand gently on the ground between them, a silent gesture that said, "I know." Days passed. They built a small camp near the creek. Anna fetched water. Tayan caught rabbits using crude snares. Their unspoken rhythm became survival itself. At night, she would hum a lullaby, and he would listen, eyes half closed, remembering songs his own mother once sang in another language beneath another sky. But peace on the frontier never lasted long. That afternoon, while Anna gathered kindling, Tayan saw movement on the distant ridge, a glint of metal, the flash of sunlight on a rifle barrel. His pulse quickened. He gestured for her to freeze. Two riders moved along the horizon, scanning the plains. Their coats were patched and ragged, the kind worn by drifters or bandits. Tayan's instincts screamed danger. He motioned for Anna to get low, his hand slicing through the air. She obeyed without question, dropping behind a fallen log. He crawled beside her, eyes fixed on the ridge. The riders dismounted, studying the ground. One pointed toward the smoke from their small fire, still faint but visible in the wind. Tayan cursed himself silently. In his weakness, he had forgotten what smoke meant out here, a signal, a trail, an invitation to death. He turned to Anna, whispering in a mix of Comanche and broken English, "Quiet. No move." The girl nodded, eyes wide. They crept deeper into the brush, crouching low. The riders drew nearer, their voices rough, laughing the way men do when they know they hold power. Tracks here, one called. Small ones, maybe a woman or kid. Tayan's muscles coiled like a spring. His heart pounded. He scanned the area. No weapons but a sharpened branch and a rock. The odds were impossible, but he'd faced worse. The men came closer, boots crunching on gravel. One stopped near the cave entrance, looking inside. Someone's been here. Tayan grabbed Anna's hand and gestured silently toward the back of the creek bed. They crawled through the reeds, their movements slow and deliberate. The bandits' laughter drifted closer. Then, a rustle, a rabbit darted from the brush. One of the men spun around, rifle raised. There! A shot split the air. The sound cracked like thunder. Anna flinched, covering her ears. The bullet struck the dirt inches from where they hid. Tayan reacted instantly. He snatched the stone beside him and threw it toward the trees on the opposite side. It hit with a loud thud, drawing their attention away. The men cursed, running toward the noise. Without hesitation, Tayan pulled Anna to her feet. "Run," he whispered. They moved low through the grass, hearts pounding, until they reached the cover of the rocks. There, hidden among shadows, they waited as the bandits searched the wrong direction. As night fell, the men gave up, cursing the wind and their own bad luck. Their voices faded into the distance. Anna let out a trembling breath. Tayan turned to her. She was shaking, her eyes wet with tears. He placed a hand over her shoulder, a gesture of comfort, not command. "Safe," he said softly. "Now safe." She looked at him, trying to smile. "You knew what to do." Tayan gave a faint nod. Many years, hiding from death. They sat in silence as stars bloomed overhead. The danger had passed for now, but the memory lingered. The sound of the shot, the cold fear in her eyes, the familiar taste of running from death. Somewhere far off, beyond the hills, a lone figure watched them through the darkness. A man on horseback, his face half hidden beneath a wolfskin hood. Greyhawk. He had followed the trail for days, unsure whether the old chief still lived. Now, seeing the small campfire flicker near the creek, he murmured to the wind, "Still you fight, brother." He turned his horse and vanished into the night, leaving only the whisper of hooves on wet grass. Back at the camp, Anna lay curled beside the embers, asleep. Tayan stared into the flames, lost in thought. The world around him was full of danger, but inside that fragile circle of light, he felt something he hadn't known in years. Peace, fragile and fleeting, like the smoke that drifted upward to the stars. The dawn rose blood-red over the plains, a sharp, wind-cutting light that spilled across the endless grass. The world looked quiet, but Tayan knew better. Silence this deep meant something waited beneath it. He stood at the edge of the campfire's ashes, the bandage around his chest stiff with dried blood, his eyes locked on the horizon. Anna stirred behind him, rubbing her eyes. "You didn't sleep," she murmured, her voice heavy with concern. He didn't answer. He was listening to the faint rhythm of hooves far away, too steady to be wild horses. His body tensed. Anna caught it too, the sound, soft at first, then clearer. Riders. Tayan's mind raced. There was only one reason men would ride this early with such purpose. Bandits. And if the gods had any dark humor left, it would be the same men from the ridge. He grabbed his knife, his only real weapon now, carved from bone and steel, and gestured for Anna to move behind the rocks. Within minutes, figures appeared, 5, maybe 6 of them, riding hard and fast. Dust rose behind them in a cruel, golden cloud. The lead rider reined his horse sharply, and when he pulled down his scarf, Tayan's heart froze. Kodo, the man who had once been his blood, the traitor who left him to die. Kodo's eyes swept the camp, sharp and cold. "Search everything," he barked in English. "There's a girl and an Indian ghost wandering here. Let's end it." The others dismounted, spreading out. Tayan crouched low behind the rocks, pressing Anna's shoulder gently. His voice was a whisper, barely a breath. No sound, no move. Her small hand clutched his arm, trembling. "What will you do?" He met her eyes. "Finish what began." The men closed in. One kicked apart the ashes of the fire. Another scanned the ground, noticing fresh tracks. They were too close now. Tayan waited, muscles coiled like a predator's, eyes tracking every movement. The world narrowed to instinct, the breath before the strike. The hawk's cry split the sky. Then a flash, a rifle shot cracked the air. One of the bandits stumbled, dropping his gun. Confusion erupted. From the ridge above, a second shot rang out, clean and deliberate. A man fell. Tayan looked up and saw him, Gray Hawk. The old warrior stood tall against the sun, rifle in hand, face painted for war. Kodo spun, cursing. He's alive. Both of them. Bullets tore through the air. Dust exploded around Tayan. He seized the moment, bursting from cover with a raw, guttural yell. He moved like a shadow, the knife flashing in the morning light. He drove it into the nearest attacker, twisted, then rolled for the man's fallen gun. Anna screamed as another bandit lunged toward her. Before he reached her, an arrow sliced through his throat. Greyhawks aimed true as ever. The gunfire roared louder now. Tayan shot once, twice. Each bullet found its mark. But there were too many. A blow struck his shoulder, spinning him backward. He hit the dirt hard, gasping, his vision blurring. Greyhawk leapt down from the ridge, firing as he came. He reached Tayan's side, crouched low. "You still breathe, brother," he said, voice steady but strained. Tayan grinned weakly through the blood. Not for long. Another shot whistled past. Greyhawk turned, fired, and dropped the man who'd aimed it. But as he moved to reload, Kodo's bullet struck him square in the chest. The old warrior fell to his knees, blood pouring down his tunic. Tayan caught him before he hit the ground. "No," Tayan rasped. "Not you." Greyhawk's eyes softened. "You have one more fight in you. Do it for both of us." He exhaled slowly, and the light faded from his eyes. Tayan laid him down gently. Something inside him cracked open, a soundless, wordless grief. But grief could wait. Rage burned brighter. He rose, staggering toward Kodo. The two faced each other across the open plain, cousins, bound by blood and betrayal. Kodo sneered. "You should have stayed dead, old man." Tayan said nothing. His silence was the storm before the thunder. They charged. The clash was brutal, close. Kodo swung his rifle like a club. Tayan deflected it, stabbing low. Kodo struck him across the jaw, sending blood spraying. Tayan's vision pulsed black, but he didn't fall. He drove forward, shoving the knife into Kodo's chest. The sound was wet, final. Kodo staggered, disbelief frozen on his face. "You were always too proud," he gasped before collapsing into the dust. Tayan dropped to his knees beside him, chest heaving. Around them, the wind carried silence again, the kind that follows when death has finished speaking. Anna emerged from behind the rocks, her small hands shaking. She ran to him, kneeling beside the wounded chief. "You're hurt," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Not first time." She tore a strip from her sleeve, pressing it to his shoulder, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Don't go," she pleaded. He reached into the pouch at his waist, pulling out a leather cord strung with a carved stone, a hawk's feather etched into it. He placed it around her neck. "This my tribe's heart," he said softly. "Now yours. You saved me, little one." She gripped his hand tightly. "I don't want you to die." Tayan looked toward the rising sun. The light painted his face gold, washing away the lines of battle and pain. "We all ride on," he whispered. "Different paths, same sky." His eyes closed. The wind lifted his hair as if carrying his spirit away. Anna sat beside him for a long time, the plains stretching endless and empty around her. When she finally stood, the necklace hung heavy against her chest. She looked to the sky where the hawks circled and whispered, "Goodbye, Tayan." Years later, settlers told a story of a girl who wandered the plains with a Comanche amulet around her neck. She spoke of a man who should have been her enemy, but became her protector, of courage born from compassion, and how even in a land carved by hatred, two hearts found a way to understand each other. And so the legend of Tayan, the Comanche leader who was left for dead but saved by a child, passed into the wind. Another tale whispered beneath the endless western sky. Voiceover closing. In the wild frontier, survival wasn't just about strength. It was about heart. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change a life or save one. If this story moved you, keep the spirit of the West alive. Like, comment, and subscribe to Frontier Tales for more stories of courage, loss, and redemption beneath the endless sky.